record the presentation. We will make it available on the Digital Leaders platform, and it will be on our YouTube channel for anybody that couldn't make it this morning to view the presentation as we go along for the future. And as we go along, we'd like to just want to give you some details around some of the protocols and admin. I'm going to introduce myself, and then David will spend a few minutes on that. And then we've got a presentation. We've got some really insightful information. So we will probably take around 40 to 45 minutes. And we'd like to then open it up to some Q&A. And if you do have any burning questions, please put them on the chat function. Myself and David will be grabbing hold of those questions, and then we can try to answer them as fully as we can as we go along. Our presentation will cover a number of sections. I'm going to set the context around digital transformation and why IT transformation is so important to enable the digital agenda. I'm then going to be talking about how you go about transforming the IT department to align to that digital transformation journey, and some of them, and I'll be introducing a maturity model which allows you to, effectively manage and monitor that journey that you're embarking on, and some of the benefits around that. Secondly, I'll be moving on to some of the people aspects of change related to organizational change management, some of the lessons that we've learned on a number of projects that we've embarked on. And we can apply that learning to digital transformation as well as IT transformation. I'll then hand over to David, who's going to be talking about how we measure and monitor and enhance the end user IT experience, and in particular, how we can use the Next Thing platform to actually give us that measurement of the digital experience. And then I'll wrap up with some key webinar takeaways. And as I said, we'll open it up to Q&A as well. So I'm still admitting people as they join, so please bear with me as I click some buttons and present at the same time. Okay, so myself, Kuldip, I have been in the IT and digital arena for something like 20-25 years. I've got significant business and IT experience. And as the Managing Director of Innovative Quality Solutions, what we do is provide interim services and transformational consultant services sitting at that intersection between business and IT. And as you can see there's a whole array of clients and organizations I've worked for in the past. And my most recent engagement was the interim head of technology at the Excel Convention Center. And you will know, and I actually helped them become NHS Nightingale a few months ago during the pandemic period. And really what we do is we tackle that digital and IT transformation agenda. And I'm going to now kind of hand over to David to introduce himself. Sorry.
Thanks, Kuldip. Thanks first for introducing me with the right name. I've been on sessions like this before and been introduced as Dave Diagnostic, and people think I'm actually part of the product that we're selling. Like you, I'm a bit long in the tooth in the IT industry. I started years ago at Glaxo back in 1976, working in various operational roles. But I guess more to the point, I've been working specifically with ITSM tools and processes for around 28 years now, joining Peregrine Systems as was back in 1991, moving through HP, 8.5 years at ServiceNow, and for the past 3 years I've been working at Next Thing, which really turns the whole kind of paradigm on its head, really, because rather than focusing on things from the point of view of IT and the data center, we're trying to turn it around and give organizations much more visibility of how services are being consumed from the end user's perspective and from the business perspective. Which is why I'm kind of excited to be doing this session with you today. I think there's a great story to tell. With that, I'll go on mute for the moment and let you tell your story, Kuldip.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to start the story about talking about technology and technology adoption. And this slide is just to and some of the conversations I was having pre-COVID. I think technology the adoption of technology has accelerated over the years, and we're always hearing about this new trend, there's AI, robotics coming. But the little picture there on the left-hand side just shows you a little bit about how that acceleration has happened. For the airline industry, it took 68 years for them to get to 50 million users. For Facebook and Twitter, it took 2 to 3 years. But if you look at the Pokemon Go game for children, it took 19 days for them to get to 15 million users. So what that really shows is that the accelerated adoption of technology change. But that's not been in sync with how we have transformed and changed as organizations. And in the right-hand side, you can see Martek's law, the exponential increase in technology adoption compared to the kind of logarithmic change that organizations go through. And what typically you find is there's a gap between that technology adoption and how quickly we can absorb that change. And that's really hindered that transformation. And there's usually a reset. Our experiences have shown that to become a high-performing agile organization, there's kind of 6 key pillars or steps. Organizational design, breaking down cultural silos and barriers, getting the culture right in terms of understanding what the business vision and leadership are trying to achieve, and making sure that the behaviors of the organization and people fit the future engagement that they're looking for from their staff. And people engagement has always been a big issue. There's lots of research out there that shows that 70–80% of staff are disengaged. Ways of working really do bring about some of that change that we're looking for. And there's all sorts of techniques and tools out there, from agile techniques to Devops type of techniques in IT, that can bring about that culture change. I think it's really important for management and leadership to really set the business agenda and the vision and the strategy, so that they provide the leadership to achieve some of the aims that they're trying to do with that digital change. And obviously, importantly, there's got to be some level of governance and the appropriate level of funding. But what I think we've seen over the last 6 months is IT have really stepped up. They've been given the pandemic, and COVID-19 has really given them the opportunity, in a way, to bring about digital workplace transformation. As we speak, we're working from home, we're able to communicate and conduct our daily working lives by working remotely, securely, and IT have done that in a very agile way, and deploying technology at pace and adapting and learning as we proceed. And that's kind of one of the key agenda points I wanted to touch upon. And we'll get onto that around the organizational change piece and people, and importantly, putting the employee at the heart of the change. I'm still omitting some people as we're going along. That really allows me to just kind of give you my definition of digital transformation. And this whole week around digital leaders is around this agenda. I think what we're seeing is that digital transformation, the technology is just the enabler, and culture is really, really important to get right to bring about that change. And I think my definition around digital transformation is really about how you can go about reinventing your business model and to enhance that customer experience or citizen experience, to enable growth and aid efficiency. And technology, because of its rapid adoption, you can really try to use it to give you some competitive advantage or differentiation in your organization and institution. I think it's really important to set that as the context for digital change, because a lot of people struggle with this definition. But this is our perspective, and we want to, as we go through today in this presentation webinar, we're going to be really focusing on the people side, and why, from an IT perspective, is so important to understand the end user and their feeling and their sentiment, so you can actually fix some of the problems they have. What do I mean by business model reinvention? Well, this slide just is trying to articulate that it's been important to always know where you're going, which is the strategy and the vision, and understanding your customer and the value proposition that you have developed, your product or your service, and then using that to understand what competencies and skills and capabilities you need for the future. And then you have to transform from that current state or current competencies to that future state. And I think COVID-19 has given us has accelerated that change. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Having worked in the events industry for a couple of years, now they're moving to hybrid events where they're hosting events, streaming them live with very little presence on the ground. And this has forced the marketeers and the event managers to create content really rapidly and quickly to generate at a faster pace. And secondly, as I mentioned already, IT departments have really helped us to transform the way we work as staff and employees remotely and again at pace and with rapid learning. And I think I was around in the financial disaster in 2008 onwards. And I think what I learned from that was that it's the organizations that can adapt quickly, that can pivot. This word that pivot everybody uses, quickly and use and innovate, bring about innovation, and they're the ones that succeeded in the longer term. And I just wanted to show you a quick graphic from Mark Itune, who says that digital transformation is years away. I think I've heard this morning in the kickoff presentations that some organization have seen 10 years of transformation in 2 months. This is startling adoption of change and digital transformation, and I think it's only going to continue. So let's have a look at some of the digital trends that are going on at the moment. Well, cloud, on compute demanding, Internet of Things, big data analytics, robotic process automation, to machine learning. There's a whole plethora of trends, and these trends plus the external factors that we've seen recently, plus changes in performance of the business, has really caused the business to change and the IT department to change. And just to reinforce the message, digital transformation is really about getting that business model reinvented and then using technology innovation at pace to give you the advantage or the differentiation to provide that service to either to your private or public sector customers or citizens, as you want to call them, to give you that competitive advantage. Here's some data that we've kind of pulled together from April onwards. This was data from HFS research in April this year that said, our CIOs and senior IT leaders, where are you going to be investing in the future? And you can see cybersecurity was increasing, robotic automation, where you're using software to automate manual tasks, smart analytics, moving to the cloud, and the story goes on. But the important message, as I've kind of alluded to already, is we've defined digital transformation, and what we've always found is there's been a pain with IT. There's always been a pain about getting the IT department aligned to the digital agenda for the business. Whilst the business needs to pivot and accelerate and use technology at pace, we've found that the IT organization hasn't quite kept up to pace. And what I want to show you now is a maturity model for IT that allows organizations with these different technology trends to actually move on that transformational journey. And then we'll get on to some of our lessons learned around change management and focusing on the employee side. So what does that IT maturity model look like, and how does that allow us to transform the IT function to become more digital? And this slide is something that we've used in many organizations, and it's called the IT maturity model, and it has a number of dimensions. You've got strategy, structure, people, process, technology, and data. And there's various levels of maturity as you go from being a reactive, disconnected IT department to becoming operationally controlled at level 2, to become standardized, then to becoming aligned to the business and IT being managed as a business. And then with that, you can then innovate and continually improve to give you the agility to get to that IT excellence level. And you can go through waves of optimization or change or continuous improvement over a period of time to get to from your current state to your future state, whatever that is desired. And this is a great tool that we've used to help IT organizations align to the business as we move forward. As you increase your IT maturity, there's a number of benefits. The benefits can be better cost optimization, and understanding the value that you provide to the business. Helps you reduce risk and uncertainty, embedding in resilience, particularly around security. Optimizing your resources so that you get efficiency and potential cost savings, and that IT agility and business agility that organizations are continually striving for. So, I've talked about digital transformation. I've talked to you a bit about IT transformation and some of the benefits using the maturity model. I wanted to now focus in on some of the people side. Hopefully a lot of you have seen this change curve. This is the S curve for organizational change management, and any transformation that you go through will require an understanding of individuals, stakeholders and groups to see where they are on this S curve, because change can cause a lot of anxiety. It can cause people and staff members to question their identity and their role. Where do they fit? And there's a lot of aspects that need to be drawn out so that we can manage stakeholders and staff so that they understand why this is important. And our experiences have shown that there's two types of change that you can bring about. And what I like to say is that we've seen the Big Bang change, where a senior leader comes in and it automatically wants to go on a transformation journey. It's going to restructure the department, and there's going to be redundancies, voluntary, and there's a big bang. And that typically takes 2 to 3 years. But what happens is, as you go along with time, the morale and the confidence really does dip. You get this dip in morale and confidence. But what we've seen more recently in terms of bringing about change in a continuous way requires a different type of mindset. It requires a mindset of thinking about incremental, agile change in small bite-sized chunks. And that has become much more prominent in a lot of the engagements and assignments that we've been working within organizations in the public and private sector. You still can get the benefits from the Big Bang, but you get a drop in morale and competence, whereas we can see that the incremental wiggly line there gives you that incremental change, and the confidence is much, much higher. What I'd like to also show you is the S curve and how teams adopt the change. What you can see is the S curve here, and what we can also see is the normal distribution, and the cumulative distribution curve is just a cumulative additive distribution of the S curve. And what we typically see is that change is really kind of being embraced when you can get innovators on board. And these tend to be quite scarce in organizations. This is where you start developing your change network, your innovators who are really going to be your champions of change. And once you can get those to get your early adopters on, you can start moving from that scarcity and crossing the chasm so you can get the early majority on board, because what they're looking for is that social proof. And once that social proof and the benefits of proof of concepts and the agile ways of working are starting to kick in, and people are starting to learn and unlearn, then you get the late majority on board. And what happens is there's always going to be some laggards. Some people are not on board with the change. But once you can break the chasm there, you get the early and late majority. What you find is either laggards either come on board, or you will lose some staff. It happens. But we just wanted to share some of our experiences on moving on that iterative change and agile change that we talked about. Some of the barriers for change, well, there's always the people side, lack of transparency. Where do I fit in? How do I collaborate? How do we improve communication? There's always challenges around getting the right processes designed, delivered, implemented. And obviously there's technology, making sure that the right tools are available for teams and groups to work together in a collaborative, non-siloed way, horizontally across your organization rather than vertically in siloed ways. And getting that mix of people, process, and technology is really, really important, as we've experienced from our digital IT and agile transformation programs and projects. What does that look like? How to be successful? Well, we think training, coaching, mentoring, and empowerment is really, really important. To get the level of commitment, you really need to be not only selling the value and the benefits, but you're educating. You're unlearning. Staff are unlearning while they're learning new ways of working. Therefore, and you're also training them with the right tools to change, so they understand why the change is happening and explain it. Then as you empower them, they become acceptive of the change, and then they can become sustainable, and then you get the advocates, and then the change champions can really sell the benefits. So rather than you having to do it, you get the advocates selling the value and the benefits and bringing people along with the change. So where does this change from an IT? So I've talked about digital transformation, IT transformation, and some kind of a quick whirlwind walkthrough of organizational change management. I think the future in terms of owning that IT change really sits with the CIO and his IT leadership team. From an IT perspective, but he's obviously got to work with senior leaders across the business. I think now is the time, as we've seen from the pandemic, that technology and IT enabling change has come to the fore. It's an opportunity for IT to rise to the occasion and actually drive that business change in an agile, iterative way, to think, using data to bring out analytics and enhancement in service improvement, using those frameworks, agile frameworks, and actually becoming a part of the corporate strategic team, using technology to give those iterative business outcomes and benefits that organizations want to go on. I'm going to jump back now. I showed you this diagram, and before I hand over to David, I showed you the IT maturity model, but I think one question that always pops up into my head is, well, okay, we need to transform, we know we need to change a culture, but how do we constantly understand the sentiment of the employee? How do we know what the IT experience is, be it as we go through a transformation, or even if we're in BAU, if you're just continually improving in a slow, iterative way, how do you know what's going on from an end user perspective? And you can't really do that by walking around nowadays from team to team, because we're working remotely, and we really need to understand the employee experience. And this is why I'm delighted to have David with me today to talk, who's going to go a little bit deeper into how we measure that engagement from employees. And he's going to introduce to us about the Next Thing platform, which really enables that, moving the IT function from the reactive stage to that proactive stage. David, can you see me or hear me, I should say? Let me, I'll stop sharing and try to get you off mute. Hi, David.
Thanks, Kuldeep. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Actually, while I'm getting myself ready, can I just double check that you can see my screen is sharing okay?
Yep.
And while I'm getting my slides together, perhaps I can ask you a quick question. We've obviously seen that kind of an agile approach gives you, more benefits more quickly with more beneficial disruption, I guess you could call it. But just I'm interested to know from your perspective in real life, I mean, what are the potential downsides and what kind of, hints and tips would you give people who are thinking of kind of moving to a more agile approach for their service management activities?
Yeah, it's a great question, David. I think I think nowadays organizations are embracing agile ways of working, and that's not just working remotely. What I'm talking about is how does the business and IT work together in developing products and services? And it's not just about putting the right ways of working in, it's a mindset shift. And it really requires IT and the business to understand that we're going to now work in bite-sized chunks of functionality. So you can see on this slide, I've tried to show where the product or the feature is really important for the business. They want agility, but they also want stability. And agile techniques where you've got a product backlog and then an IT backlog to meet it really embraces working closely. And it really requires small teams to be embracing collaboration, having stand-ups where they can, having check-ins so that there's transparency, there's visibility of what's being developed, and there's constant feedback loops because as you're iterating that product or that service. And importantly, I think the same applies to IT. IT in the development world and the operations world need to work together. And the concept of Devops, which is really a cultural change movement in IT, is really about bringing development from its plan, design, build, test, release mechanisms closer together so that each side of the coin understands how they work and they can fix things in faster, quicker, better. So for me, David, it's about mindset shift around how to work.
Yeah, that's a great point, and certainly, the past few years I've seen, if you like, the need for mindset shift to deal with digital transformation in the 21st century, and I think we're seeing a manifestation of that with the way that organisations are responding to COVID, and it segues quite nicely, really, into the kind of conversation that I wanted to have here, which is really about, if you like, bringing in an additional dimension in terms of managing technology, managing the business more successfully. We'll start with some obligatory statistics here. Technology problems cause a lot of downtime, a lot of loss of productivity. And once again, we're seeing that events like the pandemic potentially can make that a lot worse. I think the scary downside of that is that although IT management is very often aware that there are breaches of SLAs that are happening unexpectedly, that end users are struggling with business technology, so often we hear that IT didn't know there was a problem until the business started complaining about it. And I think that's one of the areas that's been exacerbated now by kind of this change in working practices. But it's an area that just overall needs to be kind of focused on. And I think one way to approach that is to say, well, right now, IT and businesses in general have focused on a couple of what you might call strategic assets. Organizations, for decades have been focused on capital, cash flow, share value, and so on. And a lot of that capital is being used to invest in the infrastructure and the technology as IT becomes more and more critical. And so you can imagine here, in terms of being able to measure that, we can see whether our investment in IT is working as it should or not. And that is, I guess, what the traditional SLA data center based approach to IT management has been doing for the past several decades. But I think what's often missed is that employees in an organization can be considered to be yet another dimension to this, another strategic asset that needs to be considered. And if we bring that into account, we can start to see that actually there are an additional set of measurements that we can bring into play here, so that we can, if you like, find that sweet spot where end users are working as they should. They're not being hit by distractions and problems and technology issues, you know, both hard and soft technology issues that are as bad on productivity as our investments in the actual technology itself can be. So I guess the question is, how in this kind of new age, I hate to use the word new normal, but how in this kind of current situation and in additional situations going forwards, will we be able to kind of stay in that sweet spot and stay productive and engaged? Well, there's a few things to consider here. One is changes are happening in all kinds of directions all the time. We've obviously still got the same infrastructure-based changes that we need to deal with. We've got to deal with regulatory changes, legal changes, changes in the way that business operates and so on. So we need to maintain that agility. But at the same time, you know, we've also got now a more engaged, a more demanding workforce. You know, we've seen with, you know, the introduction of things like bring your own device, and more latterly work in your own home. And that has led to a lot of additional changes that have actually strained many IT organizations quite hard. So we've got to be able to deal with those changes and bring ourselves back to managing in that sweet spot. And in order to do that, you know, we need to, and to use your words, you know, from the Agile perspective, Kaldip, you know, we really need to have real-time, continuous and complete visibility of everything that's happening, not only from the technology point of view, but also from the point of view of how is that technology actually impacting on the end user? Is he consuming IT services in the way that he needs to? And it's not enough just to be able to show that information. We need to be able to proactively identify the things that are going to cause the biggest impact. You know, if you're familiar with the old you know, industry kind of Deming kind of conversations around, you know, theory of constraint and identifying the squeakiest wheel in the production line. The same principles apply here. And what we then need to do, and this I think is where things like machine intelligence are becoming increasingly useful, we need to be able to identify not only the issues that we have, but maybe the actions that we need to take, both from a tactical and a strategic point of view, in order to make sure that we're staying in that sweet spot. And, you know, in an ideal world, we should have the ability to automate remediation. Again, not just heavy duty orchestration and run books at the data center end, but also managing the experience of end users directly on their devices, you know, to be able to manage things like patches, automated upgrades, identification of malware and other related issues and so on. And what that should be able to give us ultimately is much more management visibility of exactly how we should drive the tanker of IT services into the future. And if we look at that from a more granular perspective, and don't worry, I'm not going to go through one of the boxes in detail right here. And I think the point about this is, you know, it's so easy given the nature of tooling and, as you were saying earlier on, Kaldip, given the kind of culture that a lot of organizations are running at the moment, it's so easy to stay in a kind of a reactive kind of mindset, you know, dealing with issues only after they've manifested themselves. But sometimes, you know, we lose sight of the fact that there is a whole series of activities that need to be handled from a management point of view, where to start with, we need to understand things like capacity, availability, and user experience in order to understand truly what is the demand that the business is placing on us. We need to understand our portfolio of services and so on. And we need the data to help us to have clear visibility of what's going on. Otherwise, so many decisions are based on incomplete, incorrect, reactive data. You know, I once jokingly talking about ITIL as having the wrong name. It should be called Until, because IT can't do anything until they've seen something go wrong and only reactively deal with it. Another analogy I've heard is that, if the army was run like many IT organizations, it would actually be hiring more medics than soldiers, because we know that so many people are going to get wounded in the process of doing their jobs. And so I guess the idea here is that with the right data to be able to feed these more strategic processes, we've got a much clearer idea of what the business needs, what the risk is of making those changes, understanding the resources required to make the changes, understanding a whole range of issues around things like governance, risk and compliance and so on. And the idea is that with that data, we should be able to eliminate so much of the repetitive and unnecessary activity that's needed in the operational kind of world. In the ideal world, IT wants to make itself more and more invisible, and in the perfect world, we want to produce reports showing how well we've done rather than how badly we've failed. And that, I think, is where NextThink can help, because as I mentioned in the introduction, what NextThink does is take a view of those IT services and takes a view of our investment in IT, but from the end user's perspective. We're looking at the world from the consumer's point of view. And if we think about what the consumer has to do with his technology these days, he's not just using his PC for playing Minecraft or Minesweeper. He's using it for a whole range of activities. Some of these things becoming perhaps more critical in the current world, in terms of messaging capabilities, in terms of managing connectivity back to the servers or the SaaS infrastructure that he's connecting to. More and more organizations putting more and more emphasis on virtualization to be able to replicate working environments into somebody's home and so on. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, if you like, that is critical in order to make sure that our end users are remaining productive and engaged. And on the other side, IT's to-do list of stuff that needs to be done is huge. It's not just the traditional incident, problem and change activities. There's a whole increase in focus that needs to be placed on things like risk and security and compliance. How do we make sure, how do we help, I guess, employees to remain good corporate citizens when they've got the additional frustrations of bandwidth issues, working from home, having to work on a coffee table or whatever the case may be. While all that's going on, we've still got to worry about transformation. We've still got to worry about the office upgrades and the kind of the business application upgrades and so on. And I think one of the areas where NextThink can really kind of add value really is that we're able then to monitor not just the performance of the data center, but actually monitor and have insight into the end user experience itself. And so what NextThink can do is not only monitor what's going on with the device, and the NextThink platform collects in real time something like 800 separate data points, not only about the device itself, but about the connections, about the quality of service, about the endpoints that have been connected to, and so on. We've also got the ability to go far further than traditional CSAT solutions, where you send an email out and 1 in 100 gets answered. With our kind of end user interaction technologies, we're able to get something like 60 or 70% responses to the survey invitations that we send out. And at the same time, we've got the ability to respond to what we're seeing and hearing out in the infrastructure by driving automation out to the desktop. And that needs to be done, to your point earlier, that needs to be done really in a kind of a staged roadmap kind of way. You can't instantly switch on 5-star insight into the way businesses are operating. And so we can work hand in hand with organizations to take them through an increasing series of increasingly mature steps, moving from very tactical kind of device monitoring, reactive, incident enhancements and so on, leading through to, more proactive and, from an, in the spirit of Agile, the ability to have a continuous understanding of what's going on from the point of view of both the infrastructure and the end user, which means we can correlate that, we can focus on the things that need to be worked on, and actually start to take a much more business focus on that investment in IT and people that we spoke about earlier on. And in order to do that, you know, Nextthink itself is delivered as a massively scalable cloud foundation. We've got, you know, millions of endpoints under management for, you know, hundreds of customers around the world, ranging from, you know, the very largest to the very smallest. We've got the ability to analyze that data that's coming in, to present it via both management dashboards and more detailed technical views of what's going on. We've got a library of content packs that allows us to apply all kinds of learnings. So a whole series of packs to manage things like teams, to manage things like the remote worker experience, to manage business services and so on. And perhaps the other key piece is that we're not doing this in a standalone way. You know, we're actually able to augment the existing investment and the existing platforms and processes that organizations already have in place. So we've got very kind of deep and successful integrations with tools like ServiceNow, tools like Splunk, other platforms and so on. And in fact, what we'll do now, we'll spend a couple of minutes just rather than looking at slides, we can spend a few minutes actually looking at some of this in practice in a short demonstration. So what I'd like to do is come out of the Death by PowerPoint here and come in and take a look at the platform itself. So just switching over here. So what we're looking at now is, if you like, the management view of the Nextthink platform. And I've got one dashboard here, the thing that we call here the Experience Optimization Hub, that is actually taking a combination of those 800 real-time device attributes that I mentioned that we've been streaming into our central management platform in real time. We're able then to correlate that with the real-time experience that the end users are providing to us, and actually present this as a map that is showing us, if you like, a real-time picture of what's really happening in our world at the moment. And we can see instantly here that of our kind of general IT population, most people are reasonably happy with what's going on. Some people are putting up with it, perhaps, but we can see here that a number of people here are getting quite frustrated. We can see that 115 people in our total of 1,500 users are actually suffering from a much more frustrating experience. Now, I can see from the top here that a lot of the issues they seem to have are around device. The score that we've synthesized from all of those attributes, the kind of score out of 10 for IT, if you like, is around 6 for devices and slightly higher with some of the other categories. And if I want to find out exactly what's causing this frustration, I can simply click on this little and it redraws the map and shows me what's going on in terms of experience. I can redraw this to break things down by different locations, by different countries, different regions, and so on. But if we focus on this working style, one of the interesting points that's being highlighted here is that the vast majority of our unhappy users are remotely connected. So it's the workers that are working from home, shifted from the office, been through all of that kind of transition. Now, in the normal course of events, this would be good information to help us to focus on what needs to be done. What we've done is take one step further, use that data and use machine intelligence to help to guide us to actually be able to take action on this. So we can see 115 devices, and what we've got here is we're using a patented process here called issue ranking that actually highlights the things that are causing the biggest problem, back to theory of constraint. Here at the top of the list, I can see that the majority of my end users are being impacted by slow logons. And if I click that, we can even now be taken through a series of actions to help me fix that problem. The thing at the top of the list here is a simple one, just disable the applications that are in the Windows Auto Startup list, or it could be in a Macintosh as well on Mac OS. Now, Additionally, amongst these analytics, it doesn't only show us all of the programs that are running in Windows Startup, it can give us an idea of what are the heavy, what are the medium, and what are the light impact startup programs. But my issue here is I need to make these people happy before they start hitting the service desk with phone calls. And in fact, over here, I've then got a series of advice and activities that allow me, even here, by clicking this, I can actually fire off a remote action, one of those automation steps, to automatically go out to 67 devices and disable the heavy applications in the startup menu. And I guess the point about this is that we're not waiting for one person and another and a small trickle of people to phone the service desk and complain. What we're doing here is proactively going out to 67 people that's going to reduce the impact on the service desk and improve the perception that the business has of IT. So it's valuable both from a real-time operational point of view, but also from a PR perspective, I guess you could say. And that's just one simple example, one simple use case. Looking further, you can see that we've got a whole series of additional dashboards here that allow me to drill in to all kinds of detailed information. So I've got here my desktop manager's overview. So I can, at a glance, I can see the performance of my entire organization. On a single chart, I can see how all of my devices are behaving. I can see here that 99 devices have suffered a crash in the past 24 hours, a hang, so many devices having crashes. I can see how my desktop estate has been performing over the entire month. I can see here a chart showing me my end user experience directly measured. I mean, essentially what Nextlink's doing for us here is allowing us to turn feelings and stuff that was previously known about but unmeasurable, and we can turn those feelings into facts to help us to make management decisions. And if I come in and take a look here, we can see I've got 15 people here who are suffering from a poor network response time. Now I can go even further here and I can say, well, I need to hand off now. From a management point of view, I've seen where the biggest issue is. Now I'm going to hand off to my resolver teams, or perhaps to a third-party solution provider, and actually have the ability to come in and analyze that in far more depth. So simply here coming to a dashboard that immediately here is showing us perhaps where some other violations and issues are happening. We'll just give this a chance to get warmed up. We can immediately see here that not only are we now able to show you a list of who those people are, but I can even come here and say, draw me a picture of exactly how traffic is flowing from the end user through to the services that we're trying to consume. We're drawing a picture, and we're even able here to start focusing on, show me the average network response time. And the thicker the line, the worse the network response time. So we can immediately here focus on the fact that this particular network destination is the place we need to start focusing on. And we've seen both in internal IT and remote worker IT, we've been able to far more quickly identify issues that are causing a problem and deal with them in a much more timely fashion. Now, the other piece about this, as I mentioned, is the ability to integrate with other tools. And we're running a little bit short on time here, but just one example here. I'm showing you here the ServiceNow end user portal. I'm John Smith. I'm logged onto the system and I'm having a problem because my PC is a bit slow. Now, if I come to the chatbot, in the traditional world, I could come in and say, check my slow PC, for example. What that would normally do would result in an agent having to address this in a ticket anyway. But in this case, I can simply talk to the chatbot, ask it to check my PC health. And in fact, what's happening now is ServiceNow's chatbot is working via the API to actually talk directly to Nextlink's real-time stream of data. And we can see here, within a couple of seconds, we've come back, and without having to involve the service desk in any way at this point, we've immediately shown exactly what the health with that device is. Now, bear in mind that we can also potentially tap into warranty information. We can tell whether this device needs to be fixed or whether it can be replaced and so on. But in this simple example I've got here, we're highlighting the fact that this poor chap is running out of disk space. And rather than having to mooch around and try and fix it for himself or open a ticket, Nextlink is now offering to fix it for him. It's saying, your disk is almost full. Do you want me to fix it? If I click yes, I'm going to kick off a remote automated action directly on that guy's device and fix his problem. As I mentioned, we've got several dozen, we've got over 100 actually scenarios here that range from relatively simple things like reducing disk space to perhaps more sophisticated use cases where one customer has an app that crashes quite regularly. It corrupts the user's profile, and before Nextlink it was taking 20 minutes to remotely connect in and fix it. Now we can detect the crash, we can replace the corrupted profile, we can restart the application, we can notify the end user, and he can be back and operational again in 15 seconds instead of 15 minutes. So a massive amount of productivity, but productivity based on a genuine understanding of that end user's experience. And the final piece is that we need to communicate with people. So as well as automating things on the desktop, and as well as monitoring and managing everything that's going on this end user's device, we've also got the ability to communicate with the end user. So in this case, we wanted to proactively let people know that there's an issue with SAP. And rather than sending out a blanket email that's going to get deleted anyway, we can send this targeted notification only to the people who are using the affected version of this client. And we can pop up a little pop-up, send little notifications, even potentially put in some buttons and things to to maybe schedule a call back when the service is restored or whatever the case may be. And we've got the ability to use that same tool in order to do end user surveys. And this is where we're able probably to get something like 60 or 70% response rate to survey requests, rather than the 5 or 10% that users would normally get, because it's actually easier to respond to this than it is to dismiss it. Very, very quick, easy, 2 or 3 clicks, and that's all that's needed in order to make that survey, which can obviously be correlated to device performance, behavior, and compliance as well. So with that, Kuldeep, I hope I haven't spoken for too long, but I'll hand back to you to wrap up.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, David. As I do a quick wrap up, I'll share my screen again. I've noticed there's some questions that have come through, David, and they're being answered, but we might want to pick them up. I know time has flown by quickly, but I think we might be able to pick 1 or 2 up. Just as a way of kind of summarizing our webinar, I think we're in a period or a time where digital transformation has been accelerated based on the impact of COVID-19. I think is an opportunity for IT to really raise their game, to be that enabler, and senior IT leaders to be driving that strategic change agenda. The IT function needs to be transformed so that it aligns to the digital business agenda and be that partner or integrated with the business. We've shown you an IT maturity model, which allows you to kind of baseline benchmark where you are on your IT transformation journey to enable that digital journey. It's really, really important to understand the people side. And I think we've shown you the S-curve and where things have worked better in our projects, where we are doing things in an incremental, agile way, rather than the big bang approach. And, we can't force people to unlearn quickly. It takes time, and we need to understand stakeholder needs and do that change management in a structured way, and try not to force people to do too much too quickly, and focus on the innovators and the champions to get that mass adoption. And I think hopefully David has articulated a great way using technology to understand the employee experience around IT services, and where we can help from data collection through simple surveys with radio buttons and to gather the information around IT service end user experience, to measure and monitor, and then actually do some proactive problem management to help end users from an IT perspective. So we've got to moving away from the infrastructure-based metrics to more insightful IT productivity metrics. And rather than it being SLAs and OLAs, we're really trying to now meet the XLAs or expectations of our end users. And that's always been a challenge for IT to be joined at the hip in terms of meeting business needs. And this new norm isn't just about working from home. It's about being ready for that agile transformation and being resilient and ready for that myriad of unpredictable forces that are likely to come. We're going into a wave 2 in the UK, and how we're going to manage that is going to be quite important from a business perspective. And I think with that said, I'm just going to show us our contact details. There's some ugly mugshots of me and David. Please connect with us. Please fire questions at us. I know we've run over a little bit, but I hope that's been really insightful for you all. David, should we just pick up 1 or 2 questions if there are?
Yeah, there were 1 or 2 questions here. I mean, it looks like Yusuf's kind of more or less answered it, but Glyn was asking about how do issues get focused on, and I think that's I think where some of the secret next think source kind of comes in, really, because unlike a lot of other tools that collect lots of information and then dump it out as hexadecimal kind of dumps and so on. I mean, we're able, if you like, to learn from what we've seen in the past. And analyze the data that we've got coming through NextThink to kind of pinpoint exactly what it is that's going on. Plus, we're able to use some of the visualizations that we saw in order to kind of really help you kind of highlight on the things that are causing the biggest number of issues. So really the idea is that the way that data is being visualized, combined with kind of machine intelligence to highlight some of that data, should help us to focus on the things that need to be addressed sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you, David. I think there's a really nice comment from Jeremy. He says he really likes the scoring prioritization rather than it being guesswork, which is absolutely right. You want to understand the user experience, and it has to be prioritized to fix the challenge. Thank you for your positive statement, Glyn. If there aren't any more questions, we're more than happy to take, because we did start late. There's quite a large number of attendees. So if there aren't any more, hopefully we've answered the questions that you have. If there's more, please fire them in now. Otherwise, we'll close off in a minute. We'll give it 30 seconds or so. Okay. I think we're not really getting anything else. So what I'm going to suggest is, David, we put it to close. We want to thank you for everybody for taking an hour out of their diary to come and listen to us and talk to us about using digital transformation and transforming the IT function and from an end user perspective. Thank you for your time, and really please do reach out to us if you've got any further questions. David, do you want to say anything?
I just echo what you said, Caldip. Thanks everyone for your attention. Thanks for the questions, and we're here if you need anything.
Thank you. At that point, I'm going to close the webinar down and say have a great day wherever you might be. Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Take care.